Hello there, my sleepy souls. Tonight, beneath the veil of small town secrets and the pool of impossible love, we'll walk beside Elena Gilbert through her extraordinary journey. A girl who lost everything in dark water, found love with a boy who lived in shadows, and discovered that humanity isn't measured by a heartbeat, but by the choices we make when darkness calls our name. From the depths of Wickery Bridge to the heights of eternal love, through loss and longing, through blood and sacrifice. This is her story. So, let's get cozy now. Close your eyes. Breathe in very slowly and drift into a world where the living and the dead dance together, and some loves refuse to end. May 23rd, 2009. A date Eleanor Gilbert would carry forever, though she didn't know it yet as she sat in the back seat of her parents' car. Earbuds settling in her ears, lost in music and the comfortable certainty of being 17 years old. The Gilbert family said and moved through darkness along a winding road Elena had travelled 1,000 times before. Her father, Grayson Gilbert, drove with the careful precision of a doctor accustomed to life or death decisions. Beside him, Miranda Gilbert gazed out at trees rushing past in the headlights, one hand absently touching the necklace at her throat. In the back seat, Elena scrolled through her phone, half watching the familiar landscape of Mystic Falls, Virginia, the small town that had been her entire world. They were returning from a school function. Something forgettable. Something ordinary. Later, Eleanor would struggle to remember what had been so important that all three of them needed to attend. The memory would blur and fade, overshadowed by what came after. Wickery Bridge appeared ahead, its structure spanning dark water below. The bridge had been part of Mystic Falls for over a century, a piece of living history that tourists photographed and locals took for granted. Sturdy enough, safe enough, until it wasn't. The car hit something, or something hit the car. The specifics would remain unclear, lost in chaos. Screeching tires, Miranda's sharp cry of alarm. Grayson wrenched the steering wheel, trying to correct, trying to maintain control. But the bridge was narrow and momentum too great, and the laws of physics cared nothing for a father's desperate attempt to protect his family. The sedan crashed through the railing with a sound like thunder, and then they were airborne for one impossible moment, suspended between road and water, between before and after. Eleanor felt a weightlessness in her stomach, that sensation like the peak of a roller coaster, and her mind had just enough time to think this isn't happening before gravity reasserted itself and they plunged into the water below. The impact was immediate and brutal. Eleanor's head cracked against something hard and the world went dim and spinning. Water poured through windows that had shattered, cold and relentless, flooding the interior with terrifying speed. The car sank nose first, tilting at an angle that sent everything sliding forward, the engine pulling them down into murky depths. Elena's ears rang. Her vision swam. She tasted copper and realized distantly that she was bleeding. The seatbelt held her pinned as water rose around her, covering her legs, her waist, climbing toward her chest with inexorable patience. "Elena!" Her mother's voice, sharp with terror, cut through the ringing. "Elena, can you hear me?" "Mom," Elena managed, her voice sounding strange and distant. "Mom, I can't." The seatbelt. Grayson was moving, already working to free himself, his doctor's training making him assess and prioritize even in catastrophe. But the water was rising so fast, and the car was sinking deeper, and Eleanor could see in her father's eyes the moment he understood they might not all make it out. Then there was someone else, a figure diving through the shattered windshield, moving through water with impossible grace and speed. A young man with dark hair and eyes that caught what little light penetrated the murky river. He reached for Eleanor first, his hands working at her seatbelt. "Wait," Grayson said, his voice urgent, commanding. "Save Elena. Get her out first." The young man hesitated, his eyes meeting Grayson's through the water-filled cabin. Some wordless communication passed between them, some understanding that tore at Elena's chest, even through her semi-conscious haze. "Please," Grayson said, "save my daughter." The stranger nodded once, a sharp, decisive movement, and then Eleanor was being pulled from the sinking car, the seatbelt torn away, strong arms wrapping around her. She tried to struggle, tried to reach back for her parents, but he held her firmly, swimming toward the surface with powerful strokes that covered the distance in seconds. They broke the surface, and Elena gasped, choking on air and water, her lungs burning. The stranger swam with her toward shore, moving with speed and endurance no normal person should possess. He deposited her on the muddy bank, and Eleanor's hands clawed at earth, coughing up river water, her entire body shaking. "My parents," she managed between coughs. "You have to. Please." But the stranger was already diving back in, disappearing beneath dark water. Eleanor watched from the bank, her vision blurring with tears and river water and blood that ran into her eyes from a cut somewhere on her scalp. She counted seconds, then minutes, waiting for 3 figures to emerge. Only one came back. The young man surfaced alone, his face stricken with something that looked like grief, like guilt, like the weight of an impossible choice. He swam to shore and pulled himself out, water streaming from his clothes, and Elena knew before he spoke what he was going to say. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice rough with emotion that seemed too raw, too real for a stranger. "I tried. I went back for them. But the car, it was too deep, too fast. I couldn't reach them in time. I'm so sorry." Elena stared at him, at this impossible stranger who had saved her life and let her parents drown, and she couldn't make sense of it. Her parents were still down there, in the car, in the water, and this stranger was here on the bank with her, and nothing made sense. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Someone had seen the car go over, but help was coming too late, would arrive to find tragedy already complete. The stranger looked at Elena with eyes that held too much knowledge, too much pain. "I'm sorry," he said again, and then he was gone, vanishing into trees with impossible speed, leaving Elena alone on the muddy bank to wait for emergency responders who would tell her what she already knew. Her parents were dead, and she was alive, and she would never understand why. The funeral was 3 days later. Elena stood in the cemetery in a black dress that Aunt Jenna had bought for her, because Elena's entire wardrobe still smelled of river water and mud and death. She stood between her younger brother Jeremy and her Aunt Jenna, watching 2 coffins being lowered into the ground, and she felt nothing. The grief was too big to process, too overwhelming to feel. So instead there was just numbness, a cotton wool distance between Elena and the rest of the world. People came to offer condolences. Friends, neighbours, her parents' colleagues from the hospital. They said things meant to be comforting, but that only highlighted the enormity of loss. They're in a better place. At least they went together. You're so strong, Elena. She wasn't strong. She was empty. There was a difference. Jeremy stood beside her, his own grief manifesting as anger, as withdrawal. She could tell he blamed her, though he never said it aloud. Blamed her for being the one who lived. The guilt of that knowledge sat heavy in Elena's chest. Aunt Jenna did her best. Miranda's younger sister had always been the fun aunt, the irresponsible one who showed up for birthdays but wasn't equipped to raise 2 traumatized teenagers. But she stepped up because there was no one else. Moving into the Gilbert house, taking guardianship, trying to fill shoes far too big. The summer after the accident blurred together. 4 months of grief and desperate attempts to feel normal again. Elena went through the motions of living, eating, sleeping, breathing, but it was all performance. Inside, she was still underwater, still watching her parents sink into darkness, still hearing her father's voice. Save Elena. She wrote in her journal, a habit inherited from her mother. Long entries about the accident, about the stranger who had saved her, about the impossible choice her father had made. She wrote about missing her parents, about the hole they'd left, about how wrong it felt to be alive when they were dead. Jeremy spiraled. Elena watched helplessly as her brother turned to drugs, seeking oblivion, chasing numbness the way Eleanor chased normalcy. They barely spoke, these 2 siblings bound by shared tragedy, but separated by individual grief. The house that had once been full of warmth became a mausoleum, each of them haunting different rooms. But Eleanor had been the perfect daughter, the golden girl, and she couldn't let herself fall apart the way Jeremy did. Someone had to hold it together. Someone had to be okay for Aunt Jenna's sake, for the teachers who watched with concerned eyes, for the friends who didn't know how to talk to her anymore. So she decided to try. When school started, she would return to her life, would be Eleanor Gilbert again, instead of just a ghost wearing her face. She would be the cheerleader, the good student, the responsible one. She would smile and laugh and pretend everything was fine. She didn't know that summer about the supernatural world lurking beneath Mystic Fall's surface. Didn't know about vampires and werewolves and witches. Didn't know that the stranger who saved her was something more than human, or that his choice to honor her father's wish would draw her into a world of darkness and danger and impossible love. She didn't know she looked exactly like a woman named Catherine Pierce, a vampire who had terrorized Mystic Falls over a century earlier. Didn't know about the Petrova bloodline, about doppelgangers, about ancient curses that required her blood. Lena Gilbert thought she was just a girl who had survived tragedy, who was trying to rebuild a normal life from wreckage. She thought her biggest challenges would be managing grief, helping Jeremy, passing classes, maintaining friendships that felt strained and fragile. The summer ended. September arrived. Elena stood in front of her closet, picking out an outfit for the first day of school, and she made a promise to herself. She would try. She would move forward. She would live, because her parents had died to give her that chance. She looked at herself in the mirror. Brown hair, brown eyes, average height, nothing particularly special. And she didn't see the doppelganger, the Petrova descendant, the girl whose blood would be coveted by ancient creatures. She just saw Elena, 17 years old, orphaned, grieving, trying to be okay. Tomorrow, school would start. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, Stefan Salvatore would walk into her life again, and the supernatural world would acclaim her as its own. But tonight, Eleanor Gilbert was still just a girl writing in her journal, trying to make sense of loss, believing the worst had already happened. She was wrong, but she didn't know it yet. The first day of school arrived with typical late summer heat, the kind that made the air thick and heavy even in early morning. Elena stood in front of her mirror, smoothing down the purple top she'd chosen, studying her reflection with critical eyes. She looked normal, presentable, like a girl who had her life together. The cemetery seemed like the right place to start. Elena had developed a habit over the summer of visiting her parents' graves before facing difficult days. She walked through wrought iron gates into the old Mystic Falls Cemetery, past weathered headstones dating back centuries, past history that permeated every corner of this town. She didn't expect to find someone else there, didn't expect to see a young man standing among the graves, impossibly still, writing in a journal of his own. He looked up as she approached, and Elena's breath caught. It was him, the stranger from the bridge. "Hi," he said quietly. "I'm Stefan Salvatore. I didn't mean to intrude." Elena stared, her mind racing through a dozen questions. "You saved me." Something flickered in Stefan's eyes. Recognition, guilt, a complex emotion she couldn't pass. "I'm sorry. That night, the bridge, you pulled me out of the car." Eleanor's voice was steady, despite the way her heart hammered. "You saved my life." Stefan's expression shifted, and Eleanor saw truth in his face even before he spoke. He had been there. He remembered. "Your father told me to save you," Stefan said quietly. "He made me promise. I tried to go back for them, but—" "I know," Elena interrupted. "I know you tried. I needed to say thank you, even though it feels wrong to be grateful when they're dead." They stood in the cemetery, two people bound by tragedy, and Eleanor felt something shift in the air between them, a connection she couldn't explain. "I should go," Elena said, though she found herself reluctant to leave. "School starts in 20 minutes. "I'll be there," Stefan said. "I just enrolled, junior year." Eleanor nodded, processing this information. "Then I'll see you there." At school, Elena slipped back into her role with practiced ease. She smiled at Caroline Forbes, her best friend whose energy had felt exhausting all summer, but now felt almost comforting. She hugged Bonnie Bennett, her other best friend, whose quiet support had been one of the few things that helped. She waved at Matt Donovan, her ex-boyfriend, the relationship that had ended amicably but still held warmth. "There's a new student," Caroline said immediately, her eyes bright with gossip. "Stefan Salvatore. He's mysterious and brooding and absolutely gorgeous. I'm calling dibs." Elena felt something twist in her chest. "I met him this morning in the cemetery." "The cemetery?" Bonnie's eyebrows rose. Before Elena could respond, Stefan appeared in the hallway. Caroline immediately brightened, moving toward him with enthusiasm. Elena watched as Caroline introduced herself, watched Stefan's polite but distant responses, watched the way his eyes kept finding Elena across the crowded hallway. The day progressed in a blur. Elena maintained her smile, her composure, the performance of normalcy. But her attention kept drifting to Stefan, to the way he moved through the school like a ghost, present but not quite part of things. After school, Elena found Stefan waiting by her car. "I need to talk to you," Stefan said, "about the bridge." They drove to the boarding house on the edge of town, a sprawling historical property. Stefan led Elena inside, through rooms filled with antique furniture, to a study lined with books. "I need you to keep an open mind," Stefan said, his voice tight with tension. "What I'm about to tell you will sound impossible." Elena sat down, her hands folded. She had survived the impossible already. "I'm a vampire," Stefan said. Elena stared at him, waiting for the punchline. But Stefan's expression remained serious, almost pained, and slowly she understood he meant it. "Vampires aren't real," Elena said, but her voice lacked conviction. Because if vampires weren't real, how had Stefan moved so fast in the water? How had he torn through her seatbelt with his bare hands? "We are," Stefan said quietly. "I was born in 1851. I was turned into a vampire in 1864. I've been 17 years old for over 160 years. Elena's mind raced. "Prove it," she said. Stefan moved, and suddenly he was across the room, a blur of motion too fast for her eyes to track. Then he was back in front of her, and his eyes had changed, veins darkening beneath them, his canines elongating into fangs sharp enough to tear flesh. Elena's breath caught, fear flooding her system, but she stayed frozen as Stefan's face returned to normal, as the monster receded. "I don't hurt people," Stefan said quickly. "I drink animal blood. I've spent over a century learning to control the urge. I'm not dangerous to you, Elena. I would never hurt you." "But you could," Elena said. "You could kill me without even trying." "Yes," Stefan admitted, "but I won't. I swear to you I won't." Elena moved to the window, needing distance. The world had just expanded in ways her mind struggled to comprehend. Vampires were real. The supernatural existed. Everything she thought she knew had just been proven wrong. "Why were you at the bridge that night?" Elena asked. Stefan was quiet for a long moment. "I saw you earlier that day, and you looked exactly like someone I used to know. A woman named Catherine Pierce. She was a vampire, and I loved her 145 years ago. When I saw you, I thought you were her somehow. So I followed your family, and when the car went into the water, I couldn't let you die." Eleanor turned. "I look like her. Like this Catherine." "Exactly like her," Stefan said. "Same face, same hair, same eyes. You're her doppelganger." The word hung between them, heavy with implications. A doppelganger, a duplicate. As if Eleanor Gilbert was less a person and more an echo of someone else. "Is that why you're here?" Eleanor asked. "Because I look like your dead girlfriend?" "She's not dead," Stefan said. "At least I thought she wasn't. I came to Mystic Falls because I saw you, and I needed to understand. But then I got to know you, Elena, and you're nothing like Catherine. You're kind where she was cruel. You're genuine where she was manipulative. You're yourself, not a copy of anyone. Elena wanted to believe him. I need time, she said, to process this. Of course, Stefan said. Take all the time you need. Elena left the boarding house in a daze. At home, she found Jeremy in his room, high on something that made his eyes glassy. Aunt Jenna was out. Elena stood in Jeremy's doorway, looking at her brother, and felt the weight of responsibility settle heavier. Her phone rang. Caroline's voice was bright. Elena, there's a party at the grill tonight. You have to come. I don't know, Elena said. Please, Caroline begged. Just 1 hour. Elena sighed. Fine, 1 hour. The grill was crowded with students, the noise overwhelming. Eleanor found Bonnie and Caroline at a booth and tried to pretend everything was normal. But then Stefan walked in, and normalcy became impossible. He moved through the crowd with preternatural grace, and Eleanor saw Caroline's face light up, saw Matt's expression darken, saw Bonnie's unease. Stefan's eyes found Elena's across the room, and in that moment she made a decision. She could run from this, could pretend vampires didn't exist, or she could step forward into the impossible. Eleanor stood, walking towards Stefan, aware of every eye tracking her movement. When she reached him, she looked up into those eyes that had seen more than a century of history. Tell me everything, Eleanor said. About vampires, about Catherine, about this world I never knew existed. I want to know all of it. Stefan's expression shifted into something like relief. Are you sure? Once you know everything, you can't unknow it. My life already changed, Elena said. The night my parents died. The night you saved me. So tell me the truth, Stefan. All of it. Over the following days, Stefan became Elena's guide into the supernatural world. He explained the rules of vampire existence, the need for blood, the vulnerability to sunlight without a protective ring, the invitation required to enter homes. He told her about his brother Damon, older and more dangerous, who would be coming to Mystic Falls. He explained about Catherine, about history that bound him to this town. Elena absorbed it all, this impossible education, and found herself falling for Stefan in ways that terrified and thrilled her. He was dangerous, yes, but he was also the boy who had honored her father's dying wish, who drank animal blood to avoid hurting humans, who looked at her and saw Eleanor Gilbert, rather than Catherine Pierce's doppelganger. But then one evening, as they sat on her porch in the gathering dusk, Stefan's expression grew troubled. There's something else you need to know, he said quietly, about why you look like Catherine, about what it means to be a doppelganger. Eleanor felt a chill despite the warm evening air. Tell me. You're not the first, Stefan said. Catherine wasn't the first either. There was another woman, 500 years ago, Tatia Petrova. And there have been others throughout history. The universe creates you, duplicates of the original Petrova woman, for a specific purpose. What purpose? Elena whispered. Stefan took her hand, his fingers cold around hers. An ancient curse, a ritual that requires the doppelganger's blood. And in that ritual, he paused, and Elena saw something like anguish in his eyes. The doppelganger has to die. Elena stared at him, trying to process the words. She had been born for this, to die, to have her blood drained for some ancient magical purpose she didn't understand. Who? She asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Who needs my blood? His name is Klaus, Stefan said. He's an original vampire, Overs, 1,000 years old. and he's been searching for the doppelganger for centuries. The world seemed to tilt around Elena. She pulled her hand from Stefan's and stood, walking to the porch railing, gripping it hard. Behind her, she heard Stefan rise. "Elena, I need to think," she said. Not just about this cosmic destiny that had been laid on her without her consent, but about everything. About Stefan and vampires and a world that was so much darker and stranger than she'd ever imagined. "I understand," Stefan said softly. "But Elena, I want you to know, I will protect you from Klaus, from anyone who would hurt you. I swear it." She turned to look at him, this impossible boy who had saved her life and was now promising to do it again. "Why?" she whispered. "Why do you care so much?" Stefan moved towards her slowly, as if afraid she might bolt. When he was close enough that she could see the green of his eyes even in the dim porch light, he spoke. "Because when I look at you, I don't see Catherine. I see someone brave and strong and determined to live despite everything that's tried to break her. I see someone worth protecting, worth..." He paused, and something vulnerable flickered across his face. "Worth loving." Elena's breath caught. The word hung between them in the twilight air, heavy and sweet and terrifying. "Stefan," she whispered, and then she was moving toward him, and his arms were around her, and nothing else mattered. Not doppelgangers or curses or ancient vampires hunting her blood. Just this moment, just Stefan, just the impossible rightness of being held by someone who understood darkness because he lived in it. When they finally pulled apart, Elena looked up into his face and made her choice. "Whatever happens," she said quietly, "we face it together. Do you understand? I'm not running from this, from you, from any of it." Stefan's expression was both joyful and anguished. "Elena, you don't know what you're agreeing to." "Then we'll figure it out," she said, "together." And standing there on her porch as full darkness fell around them, Eleanor Gilbert sealed her fate. She had chosen the vampire over safety, the supernatural over normal, the impossible over easy. She had chosen Stefan Salvatore, and nothing would ever be the same. The truth about Elena's origins came in pieces, fragments of a puzzle that grew more disturbing with each revelation. It started with a name found in old adoption records, discovered during what should have been a routine search for her birth certificate. Isabel Fleming, the woman who had given birth to Elena Gilbert 17 years ago and then disappeared, leaving her baby to be raised by Grayson and Miranda Gilbert. Eleanor stood in her parents' study, the adoption papers trembling in her hands, and felt her world tilt on its axis once again. Everything she thought she knew about herself, about her family, about her place in the world, had been built on a foundation of carefully constructed lies. Grayson and Miranda weren't her biological parents. They had adopted her, raised her as their own, loved her completely, but she wasn't theirs by blood. Aunt Jenna found Eleanor surrounded by papers, tears streaming down her face. The late afternoon sun filtered through windows, casting long shadows across the room where normal life had existed before everything changed. "Oh, sweetie," Jenna said, her voice thick with sympathy and guilt. "I wanted to tell you so many times, but your parents thought it was better this way." "Better?" Elena's voice cracked. "How is finding out like this better?" "You were theirs in every way that mattered," Jenna said firmly, kneeling beside Elena's chair. "Miranda and Grayson loved you more than anything in this world. The adoption didn't change that. You were their daughter, Eleanor. Always. But Eleanor couldn't shake the feeling that this secret had deeper implications, that her adoption was connected to the supernatural world that had claimed her. Stefan had said she was Catherine Pierce's doppelganger, an exact duplicate of a woman who had lived over a century ago. That kind of resemblance didn't happen by accident. Elena took the information to Stefan, spreading the adoption papers across the coffee table in the Salvatore boarding house. The old mansion felt oppressive, its history pressing down on her shoulders. "I need to know why I look like Catherine," she said. "This can't be coincidence. My adoption, my resemblance to her, the fact that I exist at all. None of it makes sense unless there's something bigger happening." Stefan's expression was troubled as he studied the documents. Isabel Fleming. The name sounds familiar, but I can't place it. "My biological father is listed as unknown," Elena said, pointing to the blank space. "But I think I know who he is. John Gilbert, my Uncle John. He's been acting strange around me for months." The confrontation with John Gilbert happened in the same study where Elena had found the papers. John stood by the window, his back to Elena, his shoulders tense with the weight of nearly 2 decades of deception. "Tell me the truth," Elena demanded. "Are you my father?" John turned slowly, his face lined with guilt. "Yes," he said simply. "Isabel and I were young. We were reckless. And when she got pregnant, neither of us was ready for a child. So you just gave me away." Eleanor's hands clenched into fists. "It wasn't like that," John said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Isabel was obsessed with the supernatural. She researched vampires, studied the old families, became consumed with proving they existed. When she got pregnant, she couldn't handle it. She said motherhood would interfere with her research, so she asked Grayson and Miranda to adopt you. And you just let her." Elena felt betrayal burning in her chest. "You let her walk away from your daughter." "I was young and stupid and scared," John said. "And Isabel was persuasive. She said it was better, this way, safer. She said there were things about your bloodline that made you valuable, that people would come looking for you if they knew what you were." Eleanor felt cold dread settling in her stomach. "What I am? What does that mean?" John's expression was grim. "You're a Petrova doppelganger. Catherine Pierce wasn't the original. There was another woman, 500 years ago in Bulgaria, named Tatya Petrova. And before her, others stretching back through history. You're part of an ancient bloodline, Elena. The universe creates you, duplicates of the original Petrova woman, for a specific purpose." The full truth came from research, from old books Stefan had kept for over a century, from knowledge pieced together like shards of broken glass. Eleanor sat in Stefan's room as he explained, his voice quiet and careful, as if the words themselves might shatter her. "The curse of the sun and the moon," Stefan said. "For centuries, vampires and werewolves believed that breaking this curse would free them from their limitations. But the curse is a lie, a story created to hide the real curse, the one placed on an original vampire named Klaus." "Klaus," Elena repeated, the name tasting like ashes. "The one who needs my blood." "Yes, Klaus is unique among vampires. He's a hybrid, born of a werewolf father and a witch mother, who later turned her children into vampires. When his mother performed the spell, she suppressed Klaus's werewolf side with a curse. For 1,000 years he's been only vampire, his werewolf nature locked away. And breaking the curse requires a ritual sacrifice, Stefan finished quietly. A vampire must die. A werewolf must die. And the doppelganger must be drained of her blood, her death releasing the power needed to unlock Klaus's hybrid nature. Eleanor felt the words settle over her like a shroud. She wasn't just a girl who looked like Catherine Pierce. She was a cosmic duplicate, created by forces she didn't understand, for the express purpose of dying to benefit a creature she'd never met. "So I'm meant to die," Elena said quietly. "That's what doppelgangers do. We exist to be sacrificed." "Catherine ran," Stefan said. 500 years ago, when she learned of the curse, she fled. She turned herself into a vampire to escape her fate, because vampires cannot be used in the ritual. The doppelganger must be human. Catherine's transformation delayed the ritual for centuries, but Klaus has been searching for the next doppelganger ever since. Stefan moved to sit beside her, taking her hand. "And now he's found you." Eleanor stared at their joined hands, trying to process the enormity of it. Her entire existence, her birth, her adoption, even the parents who had loved and raised her. All of it was connected to this ancient curse, this supernatural machinery that had been grinding toward this moment for 500 years. "Tell me about Catherine," Eleanor said at last. "Not just that I look like her. Tell me who she was, what she did to you." Stefan's hand tightened on hers, and she saw old pain flicker across his face. But after a moment, he began to speak. "Catherine came to my family's home in 1863. She was the daughter of a German baron, sent to the countryside because of a prolonged illness. From the first moment I saw her, I was captivated. She was delicate, beautiful, mysterious in ways I didn't understand." Eleanor listened as Stefan described Catherine. Her golden hair, her jewel blue eyes, her gentle manner that concealed something darker beneath. She had been weak during the day, Stefan said, appearing only at twilight and after dark. She claimed illness, but the truth was simpler and more terrible. "She was already a vampire," Stefan said. "She'd been turned years before, and she'd come to our home to hide from those who hunted her. But she didn't tell me that. Instead, she let me fall in love with her, let me believe she was human and fragile and in need of protection." "And your brother?" "Damon." Stefan's voice went flat. "Damon came home from university and he fell for her too. Catherine encouraged both of us. She played us against each other, enjoyed the rivalry. And when we finally demanded she choose..." Stefan stood and walked to the window, his back to Elena. "She said she loved us both equally, that she wanted both of us for eternity, that we would all three be companions together, happy forever. But you didn't want to share her." "No, neither of us did. We each wanted her completely. And Catherine, she couldn't understand why we wouldn't simply accept her decision. So she chose to end the conflict in the only way she knew how." Elena waited, sensing what was coming. She walked into the sunlight without her protection ring. Stefan said quietly. She removed it and stepped into dawn and burned. She left a note saying she hoped her death would unite Damon and me, that we would no longer fight if she was gone. Oh, Stefan, but it didn't unite us. It destroyed us. He turned back to face her, and Eleanor saw the guilt and grief still raw after all these years. Damon and I fought beside her ashes. We blamed each other for her death, and we killed each other in that garden, both of us running the other through with our swords. Elena stood and moved to him. "But you didn't die." We had enough of Catherine's blood in our veins to complete the transformation. We woke in the family tomb that night as vampires. And Damon blamed me. He said if I hadn't forced Catherine to choose, she would still be alive. And perhaps he was right. No, Elena said firmly. Catherine made her own choice, Stefan. A selfish one. She could have chosen one of you. She could have been honest from the beginning. Instead, she played games, and when those games had consequences, she took the coward's way out. Stefan looked at her with something like wonder. Damon would disagree with you. He spent over a century and a half hating me for what happened. Is that why he came to Mystic Falls? Because of me? I don't know. I haven't sensed his presence, but Damon is old and powerful. If he wanted to hide from me, he could. Stefan's expression darkened. But if he is here, it's not good. Damon embraced what we are, Elena. He kills without remorse, feeds on humans, uses the darkness inside him as a weapon. And if he knows about you, if he knows you look like Catherine. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Elena understood now why Stefan had been so careful with her, so distant despite the attraction between them. He wasn't just protecting her from himself. He was protecting her from a world where ancient vampires hunted doppelgangers, where brothers killed each other over the women they loved, where death and transformation and eternal darkness waited around every corner. I'm not Catherine, Elena said, and I'm not running. Elena, you don't understand what you're up against. Klaus is over 1,000 years old. He's an original, which means he's stronger and faster than any vampire you'll ever meet. And he wants your blood. Then we'll find a way to stop him, Elena said. Or find a way to survive the ritual. There has to be something. Stefan's expression was torn between hope and despair. There might be. Elijah, one of the other originals, he approached me months ago. He said there was a way to perform the ritual and bring you back afterward. That with the right magic, death doesn't have to be permanent. Then that's what we do, Elena said. We find this Elijah. We make a plan. We survive. You're talking about dying and hoping magic can resurrect you. I'm talking about fighting, Elena said. I'm talking about not letting some ancient curse dictate my life. Stefan, I didn't ask to be a doppelganger. I didn't ask for any of this. But I'm not going to run, and I'm not going to hide, and I'm not going to let Klaus win without a fight. She moved closer to him, taking both his hands in hers. You told me that Catherine was delicate, that she was fragile inside and out. I'm not her, Stefan. I'm not delicate. I'm a fighter, and I will fight for this life, for the people I love, for you. Do you believe me? Stefan looked down at her, and slowly something like relief washed over his face. Yes, he whispered. I believe you. Good, Elena said. Then let's figure out how to beat a 1,000-year-old hybrid vampire. Stefan laughed, a short sound without much humor, but genuine. You make it sound simple. It's not simple, Elena said. Nothing about this is simple. But we're not doing it alone. We have Bonnie, who comes from a line of powerful witches. We have Caroline and Matt and even Tyler, who all care about this town. We have each other. She reached up to touch his face, feeling the coolness of his skin under her palm. And we have something Catherine never gave you. Trust. I trust you, Stefan. Completely. Do you trust me? With everything, he said, and pulled her close. They stood together in the dimming light of his room, holding each other, drawing strength from the connection between them. Outside the window, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. Eleanor knew that harder days were coming. Klaus would arrive eventually, and when he did, everything would change. But for now, in this moment, she had Stefan and a plan, and the determination to survive whatever darkness was approaching. She had chosen this life, this love, this impossible fight against forces that wanted her dead, and she would not go quietly into that darkness. She was Elena Gilbert, not Catherine Pierce, and she would make her own fate. Halloween was approaching, and with it came the annual Haunted House fundraiser. Eleanor stood in the gymnasium after school, clipboard in hand, trying to focus on decorations and floor plans, while her mind spun with thoughts of doppelgangers and ancient curses and the brother Stefan feared might be lurking in the shadows. Bonnie and Meredith flanked her, both studying the sketches spread across the bleachers. Caroline had drifted away weeks ago, her attention increasingly focused on Stefan despite his obvious disinterest. The loss of that friendship stung, but Eleanor had larger concerns now. "We need to measure behind the bleachers," Meredith said, practical as always. "The medieval torture chamber won't fit if we don't use that space. And we need someone to be the bloody corpse on the altar," Bonnie added. "Coach Lyman did it last year. Maybe we can convince him again." Eleanor nodded absently, making notes. The haunted house had always been one of her favorite projects, but this year it felt almost frivolous. How could she care about fake blood and rubber spiders when real monsters walked the streets of Mystic Falls? "Elena," Meredith's voice cut through her thoughts. "Are you okay? You've been distracted for weeks." "I'm fine," Elena said automatically, then caught herself. These were her best friends. They deserved better than lies. "Actually, I'm not fine. There's something I need to tell you both, but not here." That evening, sitting in Bonnie's room with the door locked, Elena told them everything. About Stefan being a vampire, about Catherine Pierce and the doppelganger curse, about Klaus and the ritual that required her death. She watched their faces as she spoke, saw disbelief transform into shock, and then into something like acceptance. "I knew there was something strange about him," Bonnie said quietly. "That day in the cemetery, when I had that vision, I felt something dark, something watching." "And the old man under the bridge," Meredith added. "The attack on Vicky Bennett. You think Stefan—" "No," Elena said firmly. "Stefan drinks animal blood. He doesn't hurt people. But there might be another vampire in town. His brother Damon." Bonnie's face went pale. "The crow. Oh God, Elena. The crow that's been following us. What if it's him?" Elena had considered this herself. Stefan had mentioned that older vampires could take animal forms, that Damon had always been drawn to darker powers. "Maybe," she admitted. "Stefan hasn't been able to sense him, but he thinks Damon might be shielding his presence." "So what do we do?" Meredith asked. "Always practical, always focused on solutions. We stay alert. We carry vervain." Elena pulled 3 small pouches from her bag, filled with the dried purple flowers Stefan had given her. "It weakens vampires, burns them on contact. If anyone tries to compel you or attack you, vervain will help." They each took a pouch, hanging them around their necks like talismans. Protection against the darkness closing in around them. The next few days passed in a strange haze. Eleanor attended classes, worked in the haunted house, smiled and laughed, and pretended everything was normal. But beneath the surface, She was hyper-aware of everything around her. Every shadow might hide a threat. Every stranger could be Damon in disguise. Stefan grew increasingly tense. He appeared at her house each evening just as the sun set, walking with her around the neighborhood, his presence both comforting and unsettling. She could feel his fear for her, his desperate need to keep her safe, warring with his belief that he himself was a danger to her. "I should leave," he said one night, as they sat on her porch. "If I'm gone, maybe Damon will leave too. Maybe Klaus won't be able to find you." "Don't you dare," Elena said fiercely. "I'm not losing you, Stefan. Not to fear, not to guilt, not to anything." He looked at her with such longing and such anguish that her heart ached. "I don't deserve you." "That's not your choice to make," she said softly. "I choose you. Every day, I choose you." The night before Halloween, Elena and the decorating committee stayed late at school to finish setting up the haunted house. The gym had been transformed into a maze of horrors. Fake corpses hanging from nooses, rubber spiders dangling from webs, a mad scientist's laboratory complete with bubbling beakers and severed limbs. "This is actually pretty good," Meredith said, surveying their work. "Creepy, but not too scary for the younger kids." "Speak for yourself," Bonnie muttered. "I'm already freaked out and the lights are still on." They were packing up supplies when the lights flickered. Once, twice. Then they went out completely, plunging the gym into absolute darkness. Elena's heart kicked against her ribs. "Bonnie, Meredith, I'm here." Meredith's voice came from nearby. "Must be the generator." "I'll go find Mr. Shelby," Bonnie said, and Eleanor heard footsteps moving away. "Wait, I'll come with you," Meredith called, following. "Don't leave me here alone," Elena started to say, but the door was already closing behind them with a hollow thud that echoed through the darkened gym. Silence fell, broken only by Elena's own breathing and the distant hum of emergency lighting in the hallways beyond. She stood very still, straining her eyes against the darkness, trying to convince herself that the prickling sensation on the back of her neck was just imagination. But then she felt it, the absolute certainty that she was being watched. "Stefan," she whispered, knowing even as she spoke that it wasn't him. Stefan's presence felt like safety. This felt like danger. Something moved in the shadows, darker than the darkness around it. Elena's breath had caught in her throat as a figure began to materialize, coalescing from the gloom like smoke taking form. "I'm sorry if I frightened you." The voice was pleasant, cultured, with a slight accent she couldn't place, and it came from directly in front of her, though she hadn't heard footsteps approaching. "Who are you?" Elena demanded, trying to keep her voice steady. "Just someone looking for a friend." The figure moved closer, and in the dim emergency lighting seeping through the high windows, Elena caught a glimpse of a pale face and dark eyes. "This is quite an elaborate setup. All this work for one night of entertainment." "The door was that way," Eleanor said, pointing toward the exit, though her hand trembled. "I think you should leave." "But I just arrived." Another step closer. "And I've been so curious about you, Elena Gilbert, the girl who looks so much like someone I used to know." Eleanor's blood ran cold. He knew about Catherine, which meant, "You're Damon." She saw white teeth flash in what might have been a smile. "So my reputation precedes me. How delightful. And what exactly has my dear brother told you about me?" "Enough," Elena said. taking a step backward. Her hand found the vervain pouch at her throat, closed around it. "He told me you're dangerous." "Oh, I am," Damon said, and his voice held amusement. "But so is Stefan, if he's being honest. We're both monsters, Elena. The only difference is I've stopped pretending otherwise." He was close now, close enough that she could smell cologne and leather, could see that his eyes were nearly black in the dim light, close enough that her every instinct screamed at her to run. But running would do no good. He was faster than her, stronger than her. Her only advantage was the vervain, and she'd have to let him get close enough to touch her for that to work. "What do you want?" she asked, proud that her voice didn't shake. "What everyone wants. Happiness, amusement, perhaps a bit of revenge." He tilted his head, studying her. "You really do look remarkably like her, you know, Catherine, although you lack her delicacy." "I'm nothing like Catherine." "No?" Damon circled her slowly, a predator assessing prey. "You have her face, her eyes, even her stubborn determination. Although I must say, your spirit is more interesting. Catherine was manipulative, cunning, but you're something else entirely." Elena turned to keep him in sight, her back now to the wall. "Stefan won't let you hurt me." "Stefan?" Damon's voice went sharp with old anger. "Always Stefan. Even after all these years, even with a new face, it's still Stefan you choose. Tell me, Elena, what is it about my sanctimonious brother that inspires such devotion?" "He's good," Elena said simply. "He fights his nature every day. He tries to be better." "How boring." Damon moved closer still, and Elena pressed back against the wall. "Goodness is so tedious. Darkness, on the other hand. Darkness can be exhilarating." He reached out as if to touch her face, and Elena's hand shot up, pressing the vervain pouch against his skin. Damon hissed and jerked back, and Elena saw smoke rising from where the herb had made contact. "Clever girl," he said, his voice holding a new note of respect mixed with anger. "Stefan taught you well, but vervain only works if you're fast enough to use it." He moved in a blur, and suddenly Elena's arm was pinned, the vervain pouch falling from nerveless fingers. Damon's face was inches from hers, his eyes dark and fathomless. "I could kill you right now," he whispered. "Drain you here in the darkness and leave Stefan to find your body. But where's the fun in that? No, I think I'll take my time with you, Elena Gilbert. I'll let you wonder when I'll strike. I'll let Stefan agonize over protecting you. And when the moment is right..." He never finished the sentence. Light suddenly flooded the gym as power was restored, and Damon was gone, vanished in the space between heartbeats. Eleanor stood gasping against the wall, her heart thundering as Bonnie and Meredith rushed through the door. "Eleanor, are you okay? We got Mr. Shelby, but it took forever." Eleanor nodded, unable to speak. She bent to retrieve the vervain pouch, her hands shaking violently. Damon was here. Damon had touched her, threatened her, and she was powerless to stop him. She had to tell Stefan. Tonight. Now. But Halloween arrived before she could find the right moment, and with it came the haunted house opening. Students flooded the gym, laughing and screaming as they navigated the maze of horrors. Eleanor stood at her post directing traffic, trying to focus on anything except the memory of dark eyes and Damon's whispered threats. Mr. Tanner, the history teacher who had always seemed to hate Stefan, had agreed to play the bloody corpse in the druid room. Elena had seen him earlier. grumbling about the fake blood on his white robes, complaining about the ridiculousness of high school fundraisers. She was helping a group of freshmen through the alien landing room when she heard the screaming. Not the playful shrieks of people enjoying scares, but real screams of genuine terror. Elena ran toward the sound, pushing through the crowd, her heart in her throat. In the druid room, she found Bonnie collapsed on the floor, hysterical, and saw why. Mr. Tanner lay on the stone altar, his white robe soaked with blood. Real blood, dark and pooling beneath him. His throat had been torn open, ripped apart by something with claws or fangs, and his eyes stared sightlessly at the ceiling. The screaming spread through the haunted house like wildfire. Students stampeded toward the exits, pushing and shoving in panic. Eleanor stood frozen, staring at Tanner's body, at the carnage that couldn't be fake, couldn't be part of the show. Someone had killed him, here, in a room full of people, and Eleanor knew with sickening certainty who was responsible. "Nobody leaves," Tyler Smallwood's voice rang out over the chaos. "Close the doors, the killer might still be here." Eleanor turned to see Tyler standing in the doorway, his face flushed with authority and something like excitement. Around him, people stopped, trapped by his command. "It had to be someone at the school," Tyler continued, looking around at the crowd. "And I think we all know who's been acting suspicious lately, who's been violent, who attacked me just a few weeks ago." Elena's blood ran cold as she realized where this was going. "Stefan Salvatore," Tyler said, and the name dropped like a stone into silence. "Where is he? Find him." The crowd began to murmur, to shift, and Eleanor saw faces turning hostile. Stefan had made himself an outsider, mysterious and different, and now fear was transforming that difference into a threat. "Stefan didn't do this," Elena said loudly, but her voice was lost in the growing noise. "Then where is he?" Tyler demanded. "Why isn't he here? Unless he's hiding because he's guilty." Elena pushed through the crowd, desperate to find Stefan before the mob did. She had to warn him, had to get him away before fear turned to violence. Behind her, she could hear Tyler organizing a search, hear the ugly sound of accusations spreading through the school. She burst out into the hallway and ran toward the parking lot, her breath coming in gasps. Stefan's car was still there, which meant he was somewhere on campus. She had to find him first. But when she reached the edge of the parking lot, she saw Matt standing beside Stefan's car, his face grim. "Matt, where is he?" Elena demanded. "I helped him get away," Matt said quietly. "When the screaming started, I knew what people would think. I told him to run." Relief flooded through Elena so powerfully she nearly collapsed. "Thank you." Matt looked at her, and she saw pain in his eyes. "I don't know if he's innocent, Elena, but I know you believe he is, and that has to count for something." Behind them, the school was alive with lights and sirens as police arrived. The Halloween-haunted house had become the scene of a real horror, and Stefan Salvatore was the prime suspect. Elena stood in the parking lot, trembling, knowing that everything had just changed. Damon had made his move. He'd killed Tanner and let Stefan take the blame. And now the real hunt was beginning. Elena drove through darkness toward the boarding house, her hands tight on the steering wheel. Behind her, Mystic Falls blazed with police lights and chaos. But ahead there was only empty road and the desperate need to find Stefan. The boarding house loomed against the night sky, its windows dark. Elena parked and ran up the steps, pounding on the door. Mrs. Flowers answered, her small wrinkled face appearing in the crack. "He's not here, dear," the old woman said gently. "Left hours ago. Seemed troubled." "Do you know where he went?" Mrs. Flowers' dark eyes studied her. "The woods, perhaps, where troubled souls go to hide." Eleanor turned and ran back to her car. The woods. Stefan had mentioned hunting there, finding the solitude he needed. She drove toward Old Creek Road, toward the place where Forrest pressed closest to town. She parked where pavement ended and plunged into trees, calling his name. Branches caught at her clothes and hair, darkness pressing close. Above, the moon hid behind clouds, offering no light. "Stefan." Her voice echoed through trees, swallowed by vast silence. "Stefan, please, I know you're out here." She pushed deeper, stumbling, over roots, her breath coming in gasps. She had to find him before the police did, before Tyler's mob mentality spread through the whole town. Then she heard it, a sound like sobbing, raw and broken, coming from somewhere ahead. Eleanor ran toward the sound, bursting into a small clearing, and there, kneeling on the ground with his face in his hands, was Stefan. "Stefan," she breathed. He looked up, and in dim light she saw his face streaked with tears, his eyes wild with anguish. "Elena, you shouldn't be here. You shouldn't be near me." "I know you didn't kill Tanner," she said, moving toward him. "How can you know that?" Stefan's voice cracked. "I don't even know that. I blacked out again, Elena, just like before. One moment I was at the school, and the next I was here with no memory of what I did." Elena knelt beside him, taking his face in her hands. "Look at me. You didn't do this. You can't be sure." "I can." She spoke with absolute certainty. "Because I know who did. Damon was there, Stefan. At the school, in the gym. He found me in the dark and he threatened me." Stefan's entire body went rigid. "He touched you?" "He tried. I had vervain." Elena pulled him closer. "He's been here all along, doing these things and making you think it was you. He wants you to believe you're a monster. But you're not." Stefan searched her face, desperate to believe. "Are you sure it was him?" "I'm sure, and I think he's the reason you've been blacking out. He's been using his powers on you while he attacks people. He wants to destroy you, Stefan." Understanding dawned in Stefan's eyes, followed by fury so intense it was almost frightening. "Where is he?" "I don't know. He disappeared when the lights came back." Stefan stood abruptly, pulling Elena up with him. "We need to get you somewhere safe. If Damon threatened you..." "He did. He kept comparing me to Catherine. He said I was more interesting than her." Stefan's jaw clenched. He's doing it again. Trying to take what's mine. But I won't let him, Elena. I won't let him hurt you. "Then we face him together," Elena said. "No more secrets, no more hiding." They left the woods, Stefan's hand tight around hers. But as they emerged onto Old Creek Road, a figure stepped from shadows ahead. Damon leaned against Stefan's car, arms crossed, a slight smile on his face. "There you are, brother. I've been waiting." Stefan moved instantly, positioning himself between Elena and Damon. "Stay away from her." "Why would I do that?" Damon pushed off the car and moved toward them. "She's delightful, smart, brave, remarkably difficult to intimidate. So much more entertaining than Catherine ever was." "This isn't about Catherine," Stefan said, his voice dangerous and low. "This is about you and me." "Oh, but Catherine's ghost is everywhere, isn't it?" Damon gestured broadly. Here we are again. Two brothers fighting over a girl who looks just like her. It's almost poetic. You killed Tanner, Stefan said. You attacked Vicky and the old man. You've been making me think I was losing control. Guilty on all counts, Damon said cheerfully. Although in my defense, that history teacher was insufferably boring. I did the students a favor. This isn't a game. Everything's a game, brother. Life, death, love, all of it. Damon's smile faded, his eyes going cold. And I'm so very tired of losing to you. Catherine chose us both, Stefan said. But she loved you more. I could see it. And then you killed me for her, Stefan. You ran me through and sent me to hell. You killed me first. Because you deserved it. Damon's composure cracked. Rage bleeding through. You always got everything. Father's approval, Catherine's heart. And what did I get? Nothing but scraps and eternal damnation. So you came here to punish me, Stefan said. To take Elena. I came here because I'm lonely, Damon said. And for just an instant, Elena heard genuine pain beneath mockery. Do you know what it's like? 160 years alone. I came here hoping. I don't know what I was hoping. Then stop this, Stefan said quietly. Stop the killing. We're brothers, Damon. We don't have to be enemies. Don't we? Damon laughed bitterly. You think we can just forget everything? I think we can try. For a moment, Damon seemed to consider it. His face softened, and Elena saw the person he might have been. But then his eyes shifted to her, and the moment passed. Perhaps we could, Damon said, if you're willing to share. Maybe Elena should have that choice. No, Stefan said flatly. Still so selfish. Damon shook his head. Very well then. I tried to offer peace. But since you refused, he moved in a blur of supernatural speed. Elena barely had time to gasp before Damon was on Stefan. The two brothers crashing together with inhuman force. They moved too fast for her eyes to track. A violent dance of predator against predator. Stefan fought with controlled precision, but Damon fought with reckless abandon. And Eleanor realized with horror that he was faster, stronger. He'd been feeding on humans, killing them, and the power that gave him was overwhelming. You're weak, brother, Damon taunted, dodging Stefan's strike. All that animal blood, it's made you soft. He caught Stefan's arm and twisted. Eleanor heard bone crack. Stefan cried out but didn't fall, using his free hand to land a blow that sent Damon staggering. I'm strong enough, Stefan ground out through pain. Are you? Damon was on him again. This time when they collided, Damon ended up behind Stefan, one arm locked around his throat, strong enough to protect her. Stefan struggled, but Damon's grip was inexorable. Eleanor watched in frozen horror as Damon's face changed, fangs extending, features becoming monstrous. Watch closely, Eleanor, Damon said, his voice distorted. Watch what we really are. He bit down on Stefan's throat, and Stefan's scream tore through the night. Elena finally moved, running toward them, but Damon's free hand shot out, stopping her without looking. Stay, he commanded, and she felt compulsion slam into her mind. Her feet stopped moving, though every part of her screamed to help Stefan. Damon drank deeply, and Eleanor could see Stefan weakening, his struggles growing feeble. The feeding seemed to go on forever, Damon's throat working as he swallowed Stefan's blood, his power growing while Stefan's drained. Finally, Damon released him. Stefan collapsed to the ground, barely conscious, blood streaming from his neck. Damon stood over him, wiping his mouth, his eyes glowing with stolen life. "You see," Damon said to Elena, "this is what we are. Monsters who feed on each other. Stefan can pretend to be civilized, but he's just as much a killer as I am." The compulsion lifted and Elena ran to Stefan, dropping to her knees. He was so pale, his eyes unfocused. She pressed her hands to the wound, trying to stop the bleeding. "Leave him," Damon said. "He'll heal, eventually." He tilted his head, studying them. Although that might be difficult since the whole town thinks he's a murderer. "Why are you doing this?" Elena demanded through tears. "Because I can. Because he deserves it. Because I'm bored and destructive and tired of pretending to be anything else." Damon crouched down. "I'm going to take her, brother. Maybe not today, but eventually, Elena will be mine, just like Catherine should have been." "Never," Stefan whispered. "We'll see." Damon looked at Elena. "I'll be watching you, every moment, every breath, and when you least expect it, I'll be there." He vanished into darkness, leaving Elena kneeling with Stefan bleeding in her arms. She held him close, feeling his labored breathing, the terrible cold of his skin. "Stay with me," she whispered. "Stefan, please." "Elena," he murmured, his hand finding hers weakly. "You have to run. Not safe. I'm not leaving you, never." She didn't know how long they stayed there. The wound on his neck closed gradually, his breathing steadied, color returned by tiny degrees. When he was finally strong enough to stand, Elena helped him to his car. They drove back to the boarding house in silence, both processing what had happened. Damon had declared war. He'd proven he was more powerful, more ruthless, more dangerous than either had imagined. "He'll come for you," Stefan said as they pulled up to the boarding house. "He won't stop." "Then we fight him," Elena said. "Together." Stefan looked at her, his eyes full of love and fear. "I can't lose you. Not to Damon, not to Klaus, not to anything." "You won't," she promised, "because I'm not Catherine. I don't break." She kissed him then, gentle and fierce at once. When they pulled apart, she saw determination replace fear in his eyes. "We fight," he agreed, "until the very end." They went into the boarding house together, two souls bound by love and tragedy, facing darkness that wanted to consume them. But they would not face it alone, and they would not surrender without a fight. Months passed in a strange rhythm of normalcy, punctuated by terror. Stefan was cleared of Tanner's murder when evidence showed he'd been nowhere near the scene. The town's suspicion faded but never fully disappeared. He remained an outsider, mysterious and vaguely threatening in eyes of those who didn't know the truth. Eleanor lived with constant awareness of Damon's presence. She never saw him, but she felt him watching. The crow that perched outside her window, the shadow that moved just at the edge of vision, the sense of eyes on her back when she walked alone. Stefan taught her to defend herself, to recognize compulsion and resist it, to carry Verve in all ways. They were preparing for war, though they didn't know when or how it would come. Then came news that changed everything. Another vampire had arrived in Mystic Falls. Not Damon this time, but someone far more dangerous. His name was Klaus, and he was an original. Elena first heard the name from Stefan, spoken with such fear that her blood ran cold. Klaus was over 1,000 years old, Stefan explained. He was the hybrid, the vampire-werewolf creature whose curse required the doppelganger's death to break. "He's here," Stefan said one evening, his voice tight with dread. "I felt his presence in town today. He's searching for you, Elena." Then we run, Elena said. We leave tonight. He'll find you. He's been searching for the doppelganger for 500 years. He won't stop until he has you. But they tried anyway. They made plans to disappear, to vanish into the vastness of the world. Stefan withdrew money, arranged new identities, mapped routes that would take them far from Mystic Falls. They never got the chance to use them. Kai Parker arrived on a cold November evening, appearing at Elena's door with a smile that held no warmth. He was young, perhaps mid-20s, with dark hair and eyes that seemed to swallow light. "Elena Gilbert," he said, pleasantly. "I've been looking for you." Elena's hand went to the vervain at her throat, but Kai laughed. "That won't work on me. I'm not a vampire. I'm a witch. Well, a siphoner technically. I can't generate my own magic, but I can take it from others." "What do you want?" "Revenge, mostly. Your friend Bonnie helped trap me in a prison world for months. I don't appreciate being imprisoned." He tilted his head, studying her. "But I think hurting her directly would be too quick, too merciful. I want her to suffer, and the best way to make her suffer is through you." Elena tried to run, but Kai moved faster. His hand caught her arm, and she felt something flow from him into her. Magic, cold and invasive, wrapping around her like chains. "Sleep," Kai whispered, and the word carried power that Elena couldn't resist. Her knees buckled. Stefan was suddenly there, catching her, his face panicked. Elena, stay awake." But she couldn't. Drowsiness swept through her like a tidal wave, dragging her down into darkness. The last thing she heard was Kai's voice, bright with malicious joy. "Sweet dreams, Elena Gilbert. You're going to be sleeping for a very, very long time." She woke in her own bed, Stefan beside her, his hand gripping hers desperately. "Elena, thank God. I thought..." "What happened?" Her voice was thick, her head foggy. Kai cast a spell. Stefan's face was anguished. "It links your life to Bonnie's. As long as Bonnie lives, you'll sleep. You won't age, won't change. But you won't wake up. Not until Bonnie dies," Elena finished, understanding flooding through her. "How long?" "Bonnie's 18 years old and healthy. It could be 60 years, 70, maybe more." The room spun around Elena. 60 years. She would be in her 80s when she woke, if she woke at all. She would miss her entire life. "There has to be a way to break it," she said desperately. But there wasn't. Bonnie tried everything. Every spell in her grandmother's grimoires, every source of magic she could find. The spell was unbreakable, except by Bonnie's death. "Then that's what we do," Bonnie said, her voice shaking but determined. "I'll end it. I'll free you." "No." Elena grabbed her friend's hands. "Bonnie, no. You're going to live. You're going to have an amazing life. Promise me. But I'll sleep, and when I wake up, you'll tell me about all the wonderful things you did." Eleanor was crying now. "Promise me, Bonnie, please." Bonnie promised through tears, and Eleanor felt exhaustion returning, stronger now. She had minutes before the spell claimed her fully. She said goodbye to everyone. To Caroline, who sobbed and held her tight. To Meredith, whose stoic face crumbled. To Matt, who'd been her first love and her constant friend. To Jeremy, her brother, who'd finally gotten clean and was building a real life. And finally, to Stefan and Damon, both standing in her room as the sun set outside. "I don't know which of you I love more," Elena admitted, her eyes already closing. "Maybe I love you both. Maybe Catherine was right about that." "Don't," Stefan whispered. "Elena, don't go." Wait for me, she said. Both of you. And when I wake up, we'll figure out what comes next. Damon, for once, wasn't smiling. 60 years is a long time. I know, but I'm asking anyway. Her voice was fading. Promise me you won't kill each other while I'm gone. Promise me you'll protect Bonnie, let her live. We promise, Stefan said, though his voice broke. I love you, Elena whispered. I love both of you. Don't forget me. And then darkness took her, soft and absolute, and she knew nothing more. They placed her in the Salvatore crypt, in a glass coffin like something from a fairy tale. Stefan and Damon took turns keeping vigil, sitting beside her sleeping form, talking to her though she couldn't hear. Day 1, Damon said that first night, settling into the chair beside her coffin. This is going to be the longest wait of my very long life. But I meant what I said, Elena. I'll be here when you wake up. Stefan came the next evening, his hand pressed against the glass. I should have protected you better. I should have seen Kai coming. But I'll use this time to become stronger. When you wake up, I'll be ready to face anything. The days turned to weeks, the weeks to months, the months to years. Bonnie lived. She graduated high school and went to college, studying anthropology and ancient languages. She traveled to Europe, to Asia, to Africa, learning magic from covens that had practiced for centuries. She fell in love with a witch in Prague and had her heart broken when he betrayed her trust. She fell in love again with a human in Tokyo and learned that love didn't require magic to be real. She carried the guilt of Elena's sleep like a stone in her chest, but she kept her promise. She lived fully, completely, knowing Elena would have wanted nothing less. Stefan and Damon made an uneasy peace, united by their shared vigil and their love for the sleeping girl. They protected Mystic Falls together, fought threats together, even managed something like friendship in the long decades. 20 years today, Damon said one evening, standing beside Stefan at Elena's coffin. She's missed her entire 20s, college, first jobs, all of it. I know, Stefan said quietly, but she's safe. That's what matters. Is it? She's asleep, Stefan. She's not living, but she will. When Bonnie dies naturally, when she's lived a full life, Elena will wake up. Damon was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I'm going to take the cure. Stefan turned to him, shocked. What? I found a way to extract it from Elena's blood without waking her. I can become human again. Damon looked at the sleeping figure. I want to be human when she wakes up. I want to grow old with her. You'll die, Damon. In 60, 70 years, you'll be gone. Good, Damon said. I'm tired of eternity. I want a human life with the woman I love, however brief it is. So Damon took the cure, and slowly, over years, he began to age. His hair went from black to grey to white. Lines appeared around his eyes and mouth. His movements became less fluid, more careful. But he kept his vigil, visiting Elena every week without fail, talking to her about the changing world. Year 30, he told her on what would have been her 48th birthday. The world has these devices now called smartphones. They're like computers you carry in your pocket. You're going to be so confused when you wake up. Stefan visited less frequently as the years passed. The pain of seeing her unchanged while the world transformed becoming too much to bear. But he never forgot her, never stopped loving her, never stopped hoping she would wake. The world changed around Elena's sleeping form. The Berlin Wall fell and rose again in memory. Wars were fought and ended. Technology advanced in ways that seemed like magic. Cars began to drive themselves. People carried the sum of human knowledge in their pockets. The impossible became mundane. Through it all, Eleanor slept, dreaming dreams she would never remember. Caroline remained vampire young, frozen at her transformation age, watching her human friends grow old and die. She married Alaric and helped raise his daughters from his marriage to Jo. The daughters who survived even after their mother was killed. She watched those daughters grow up, have children of their own, grow old themselves. 50 years, Caroline said, standing beside Eleanor's coffin with tears on her face. Half a century, Eleanor. I've lived so much and you've missed all of it. But Bonnie's still alive, still traveling, still learning. She's in her 60s now and still beautiful, and you'd be so proud of her. Bonnie returned to Mystic Falls for the first time in decades when she turned 70. She stood beside Elena's coffin, her face lined with age, her hair white, but her eyes still bright. I've done what you asked, Bonnie said softly. I've lived, Elena. I've seen the world, loved and lost and loved again, learned magic from masters on 6 continents. I've had the most amazing life, and I carried you with me every step, every day, knowing that my living was your gift to me. She reached out and touched the glass. But I'm getting old now. My body's wearing down, and I know that when I go, you'll finally wake up. I hope you can forgive me for living so long. The final years passed quickly. Bonnie turned 75, then 80. Her magic remained strong even as her body weakened. She settled in Mystic Falls, wanting to be close to Elena at the end. Damon visited Elena's coffin one last time when he was 87 years old. He was frail now, leaning on a cane, his breathing labored. But he made the journey down to the crypt, stood beside the coffin, and spoke to the girl who hadn't aged a day. I don't think I'll make it to see you wake up, he said, quietly. My heart's failing, Elena. The doctors say I have weeks, maybe days, but I kept my promise. I waited as long as I could, and when you wake up, if you remember me at all, know that loving you was worth every moment of the wait. He died 2 weeks later, peacefully in his sleep, with Caroline holding his hand. Stefan had died 5 years earlier, sacrificing himself to save a busload of children from a fire. He died a hero, and Caroline told Elena's sleeping form that Stefan had finally found the redemption he'd been seeking for over a century and a half. And then came the day when hell opened beneath Mystic Falls. Catherine Pierce, dead for years, but still causing chaos from beyond the grave, found a way to orchestrate one final revenge. Hellfire erupted beneath the town, threatening to consume everything and everyone. Bonnie Bennett, 80 years old and still powerful, stood at the center of the maelstrom. She was the only one strong enough to stop it, the only witch capable of sealing the breach. I can do it, she told Caroline, but I won't survive. It will take all my magic, all my life force. Then don't, Caroline begged. Let someone else. There is no one else. Bonnie smiled, peaceful and ready. And it's time, Caroline. I've lived a long, full, beautiful life. Longer than I ever expected. Elena can finally wake up. She walked into the hellfire, her magic blazing around her like wings. She channeled every ounce of power she possessed, burning herself out to save everyone she loved. Bonnie Bennett died smiling, knowing she kept her promise to the very end. and in the Salvatore crib, Eleanor Gilbert gasped and opened her eyes. Eleanor's first conscious thought was confusion. She remembered saying goodbye, remembered Stefan's face as she drifted into enchanted sleep. But now she was awake, her mind sharp, her body feeling strange after so long in stasis. She sat up slowly and looked around. She was in a crypt, surrounded by flowers that someone had kept fresh. Photographs lined the walls showing people she loved frozen in moments of happiness. But something felt wrong, felt different in ways she couldn't yet name. The door opened and Caroline walked in, looking exactly the same as the day Elena had closed her eyes. Still vampire beautiful, still young, but there was a weight in her expression that spoke of decades lived. "Elena," Caroline whispered, and then she was moving, gathering Elena into her arms. "You're awake. Oh God, you're finally awake." "How long?" Eleanor asked, though part of her didn't want to know. 63 years. Caroline pulled back, studying Elena's face. "You've been asleep for 63 years. Bonnie died this morning. She saved everyone, and the spell broke. 63 years. The number settled over Elena like a weight. She was 80 years old, though her body was still 17. She'd missed her entire life. "Where is everyone?" The question came out small, frightened. "Jeremy's gone. Died 15 years ago, peacefully. Alaric too. And Stefan." Caroline's voice caught. "Stefan sacrificed himself years ago to save children from a fire. He died a hero." Elena felt her heart shatter. Stefan gone, dead and buried while she slept. She'd never see him again, never touch him, never tell him how much he meant. "And Damon," she whispered. "He died 2 weeks ago." Caroline's tears fell freely now. "He took the cure, Elena. He became human for you. He lived to 87, and he visited you every week until he was too weak to make the journey. He died peacefully." Elena couldn't breathe. Both of them gone. The Salvatore brothers who had loved her, fought for her, waited for her, both dead while she slept. "I'm so sorry," Caroline said. "I know this is overwhelming, but Eleanor, they both died knowing you'd wake up. They both died at peace." Eleanor nodded numbly, unable to speak. The grief was too large, too consuming. She'd lost everyone. Her parents, her brother Stefan, Damon, Bonnie. Everyone she'd ever loved was gone. "Come on," Caroline said gently. "Let's get you out of this crypt. The world has changed a lot. You're going to need time to adjust." The world had indeed changed. Elena emerged from the Salvatore crypt into a mystic falls that was familiar and alien at once. The buildings were the same. The streets followed the same paths, but everything else was different. Cars moved silently, their engines electric. People walked with their faces buried in glowing rectangles that Caroline explained were smartphones. Technology that would have seemed like science fiction had become mundane. Caroline drove Elena to her own house, a small cottage on the edge of town. Inside, she sat Elena down and began the overwhelming task of explaining 6 decades of change. "The internet connects everyone now," Caroline said, showing Elena a laptop. "You can talk to people across the world instantly. You can access almost any information you want. And these," she held up a smartphone, "these are like portable computers. Everyone has one." Eleanor stared at the device, feeling ancient despite her teenage body. "I don't understand any of this." "You will. It just takes time." Caroline squeezed her hand. "Eleanor, I know everything feels impossible right now, but you're strong. You'll adapt." I'm 80 years old, Caroline. Everyone I loved is dead. How do I adapt to that? One day at a time, Caroline said softly. That's all any of us can do. The next weeks were a blur of learning and grieving. Eleanor visited graves, standing before headstones that marked the end of lives she'd missed. Jeremy's grave beside their parents, Alaric's next to Joe, Stefan's in the Salvatore family plot, and finally, Damon's, the earth still fresh. She knelt before Damon's grave and let herself cry for the first time since waking. All those years he'd waited, growing old while she stayed young. All those visits he'd made, talking to her sleeping form, holding on to hope even as his body failed. I'm sorry, she whispered to the stone. I'm sorry I wasn't there. I'm sorry you had to wait so long. A voice spoke from behind her. He didn't mind the waiting. Elena turned to see an elderly woman approaching, leaning on a cane. It took a moment to recognize her. Mrs. Flowers. The same, dear, though I'm older than dirt now. Mrs. Flowers settled onto a bench beside the graves. I was with Damon at the end. He asked me to give you a message if you woke up. Elena's throat tightened. What message? He said to tell you that loving you was the best decision he ever made, that the waiting was worth it for the time you had together before you fell asleep, and that he'd find you on the other side when your time came. Tears streamed down Elena's face. I never got to say goodbye. He knew, dear. He always knew you loved him. Mrs. Flowers patted Elena's hand with her own gnarled one. Stefan knew too. They both died certain of your love. That's not a small thing. Elena nodded, unable to speak. She stayed at the graves long after Mrs. Flowers left, talking to the stones, telling Stefan and Damon about waking up, about how lost she felt in this new world. Slowly, painfully, Elena began to build a new life. Caroline helped her get identification, explain social media and streaming services and all the other technologies that had emerged while she slept. Elena felt like an archaeologist studying an alien civilization, trying to understand customs that everyone else took for granted. Why are people always looking at their phones? She asked one day. Don't they talk to each other anymore? They do, Caroline said. They just talk differently now, through text and social media. It's weird, I know, but you'll get used to it. Eleanor wasn't sure she wanted to get used to it. She missed the world she'd known, the one where people looked at each other instead of screens, where connection meant being physically present. But she was alive, and she'd promised herself long ago that she would live fully no matter what happened. So she began to move forward, one small step at a time. 6 months after waking, Elena made a decision. She enrolled at Whitmore University to finish the medical degree she'd started 63 years ago. Are you sure about this? Caroline asked. You'll be in classes with teenagers. I know, Elena said, but I promised my father I'd become a doctor, and I'm going to keep that promise, even if it takes me another 60 years. The other students thought she was eccentric, this woman who looked young but spoke like someone from another era. They whispered about her, wondered why someone so old would bother with college. But Elena didn't care. She had purpose now, a goal that gave shape to her days. She studied late into the night, learning medicine that had advanced dramatically during her sleep. Treatments that had been experimental were now standard. Diseases that had been death sentences were now curable. The human body was understood in ways that would have seemed miraculous. It was hard, so much harder than she'd expected. Her mind worked differently now, aged by grief, even if her body remained young. She had to work twice as hard as the other students to keep up. But she persevered. She attended every class, completed every assignment, refused to give up even when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her. "You're doing amazing," Caroline said one evening, finding Eleanor surrounded by textbooks. "Your father would be so proud." "I hope so," Eleanor said. "It's all I have left of him now, this dream of becoming a doctor." 4 years passed. Eleanor poured herself into her studies, let the work consume her so she didn't have to think about everything she'd lost. When grief threatened to drown her, she buried herself deeper in anatomy and physiology, in pharmacology and pathology. She graduated at 85 years old, walked across the stage to receive her medical degree as Dr. Elena Gilbert Salvatore. Caroline was in the audience, cheering louder than anyone else, and Eleanor felt a spark of pride break through the numbness that had become her constant companion. "What now?" Caroline asked afterward. "Now I help people," Elena said. "That's what doctors do." She used Damon's inheritance to open a free clinic in Mystic Falls. The Salvatore fortune had grown substantially over the decades, invested wisely, and Eleanor had more money than she could ever spend. So she spent it on medicine, on equipment, on providing care for people who couldn't afford it. The clinic opened on a grey spring morning, and within hours there was a line out the door. People who'd been putting off treatment because of cost, who'd been suffering in silence, who'd been choosing between medicine and rent. Elena treated them all. She said broken bones and diagnosed diseases, prescribed medication, and offered comfort. She worked 12-hour days, came home exhausted, and felt more alive than she had since waking. "You're going to burn yourself out," Caroline warned. "You need to rest." "I'll rest when I'm dead," Elena said. "Right now, I need to be useful." The years passed more quickly now. Eleanor's hair began to grey, silver threading through the brown. Lines appeared around her eyes and mouth, marks of age finally catching up to her preserved body. She moved more slowly, more carefully, her joints beginning to ache. At 90, she hired another doctor to help run the clinic, someone younger who could work the long hours she no longer could. But she still came in every day, still saw patients, still found purpose in healing. Caroline visited often, vampire young forever, watching her friend age while she remained unchanged. There was sadness in Caroline's eyes, the knowledge that soon she would be alone again, would lose another person she loved. "Don't be sad," Eleanor told her one evening, as they sat on Eleanor's porch watching the sunset. "I've had a good life, Caroline. Strange and tragic and nothing like I planned, but good nonetheless." "I'm going to miss you," Caroline whispered. "I've already missed you for 63 years. I don't know how to do it again." "You'll do it the way you always do. One day at a time, holding on to the people you still have, making new connections." Elena took Caroline's hand. "You're going to be okay. You've survived centuries. You'll survive this too." At 93, Eleanor's heart began to fail. The same heart that had stopped and started so many times, drowned at Wickery Bridge, transformed by vampire blood, restored to humanity. It was finally wearing out. She went into the hospital on a spring morning. The sun streaming through windows, Caroline at her side. "I'm ready," Elena said softly. I've done what I came back to do. I've helped people, honored my father's memory, lived as fully as I could. I'm ready to rest. Do you think there's something after? Caroline asked. Peace? I know is, Elena said with certainty. I can feel them waiting, all of them. My parents, Jenna, Bonnie, Stefan, Damon. They're all there, Caroline, and I'm ready to join them. I'm going to miss you so much. I know, but you'll see me again someday when your story ends. And until then, you'll live and love and make your own peace. Elena squeezed Caroline's hand with what little strength she had left. Promise me you'll be happy, Caroline. Promise me you'll find joy. I promise, Caroline whispered through tears. Elena closed her eyes, her breathing growing shallow. She thought of everyone she'd loved, everyone she'd lost. She thought of her parents dying to save her, of Stefan and Damon waiting decades for her to wake, of Bonnie living a full, beautiful life so Elena could have her own. She thought of the impossible journey from that night at Wickery Bridge to this quiet hospital room. All the darkness she'd faced, all the love she'd found, all the impossible things that had become her normal. Thank you, she whispered to the people who couldn't hear her. Thank you for everything. Dr. Elena Gilbert Salvatore died peacefully on a spring morning, the sun warm on her face, her best friend holding her hand. She was 93 years old, and she died knowing she'd lived a life that mattered. And when she opened her eyes again, she was no longer in the hospital. She was standing somewhere that felt like home, though she'd never been there before. The Gilbert Lake house materialized around her, warm and bright with the scent of her mother's cooking and the sound of her father's laughter. Elena looked down at her hands and saw they were young again, unmarked by age. She touched her face and felt smooth skin, no lines or wrinkles. She was 17 again, the age she'd been when everything changed. Elena. She turned at the sound of her name and saw Jenna rushing toward her, young and radiant and smiling. Behind her came John Gilbert, looking peaceful and proud. And then her parents emerged, Grayson and Miranda, unchanged by death, their love as fierce as she remembered. Elena ran to them, and they gathered her in their arms, and for the first time in nearly a century, she felt complete. Welcome home, sweetheart, her mother whispered. We've been waiting for you. I'm sorry it took so long, Elena said through happy tears. You're here now, her father said. That's all that matters. A voice spoke from behind her, familiar and beloved. About time you showed up, Elena. She turned, and there was Bonnie, young and beautiful, her smile bright. You kept your promise. You lived. So did you, Elena said, embracing her friend. You lived the most amazing life. We both did, Bonnie said. Strange and tragic and wonderful. And then she saw them, Stefan and Damon, standing together by the lake, both young again, both whole. No rivalry between them now, no hatred, just peace and love and the patience of eternity. Eleanor walked toward them slowly, hardly daring to believe this was real. But when Stefan opened his arms, she ran into them, and they were solid and warm and everything she remembered. I missed you, she whispered against his chest. I missed you so much. We were never far away, Stefan said. We've been watching over you this whole time. Damon stepped forward and Eleanor reached for him too, pulling him into the embrace. The three of them stood together by the eternal lake, finally at peace, finally whole. Is this real? Elena asked. Or am I dreaming? It's real, Damon said. As real as anything ever was. Eleanor looked around at everyone she loved, all gathered in this place beyond death. What happens now? Now, Stefan smiled. Now we have forever. And standing there by the lake with the people she loved, Eleanor Gilbert finally understood. This was the reward for surviving, for fighting, for choosing love over fear again and again. This was home. This was peace. This was where she belonged. Time moved. Differently in the place beyond death. Eleanor walked beside the lake with Stefan and Damon, and somehow she found herself asking the question she'd always wondered about. How had it really happened? How had two brothers who loved each other become eternal enemies over a girl who looked like her? Stefan took her hand, and suddenly they were no longer by the lake. They stood in a place of memory, watching scenes unfold like shadows on water. Florence, Italy, 1463. The world was in the full flower of the Renaissance. Art and philosophy flourishing in ways that would echo through centuries. The Salvatore estate rose before them. A grand villa surrounded by cypress trees and gardens where fountains played. Elena could see the house as it had been, alive with servants and family, filled with the warmth of living. My father was Giuseppe Salvatore, Stefan said quietly, his voice coming from beside her, though his younger self moved through the memory ahead. A merchant who'd made his fortune in silk and spices. He was stern, demanding, impossible to please. Elena watched a broad-shouldered man with greying hair stride through the villa, his voice sharp as he called orders to servants. There was no warmth in him, no softness. "And your mother?" Elena asked. "Died when I was born. Damon never forgave me for that." Stefan gestured to another figure, a young man perhaps 19 or 20, darkly handsome, with an arrogant tilt to his head. He was 6 years older than me, old enough to remember her, to mourn her, and I was the reason she was gone. Young Stefan appeared, barely 13, studying books in a sun-filled room. He had the same fine features, the same gentle eyes, but there was an innocence to him that the centuries had worn away. "I wanted to please our father," Stefan said. "I studied hard, learned Latin and Greek, mathematics and philosophy. I thought if I was good enough, smart enough, perfect enough, he might love me." "Did he?" Elena asked, though she already knew the answer. "No, nothing I did was ever enough." Stefan's voice held old pain. "And Damon? Damon stopped trying. He went to university in Rome and became everything father hated. Wild, reckless, drinking and gambling and dueling. When he came home, they fought constantly." The scene shifted. Now both brothers were older, Stefan perhaps 17, Damon in his early 20s. They stood in the garden, tension crackling between them like lightning. "Then she arrived," Damon said, speaking for the first time. His voice held something Eleanor had never heard before, softness, almost tenderness. "Catherine Pierce." A girl appeared, moving through the garden like sunlight made flesh. She wore a gown of pale blue silk, her golden hair caught up in a jeweled net, and her eyes were the color of lapis lazuli. Elena's breath caught because it was like looking in a mirror, seeing her own face on someone else. "Baron von Schwarzschild brought his daughter to our estate," Stefan continued. "She'd been ill," he said. The Italian countryside would help her recover, but she could only appear at night when the air was cool and the sun wouldn't tire her. Elena watched Catherine move through the memory, saw how both brothers looked at her with identical expressions of longing. Catherine laughed at something young Stefan said, touched his arm lightly, then turned that same warm smile on Damon. She played us against each other from the start, Damon said, but there was no anger in his voice now, only acceptance. She was already a vampire, though we didn't know it. She'd been turned years earlier to escape death from illness, and she needed us both. Our blood, our protection, our love. I fell for her completely, Stefan said. She was delicate and mysterious, and she looked at me like I was the only person in the world. For the first time, I felt seen, special, loved. The scene shifted to a moonlit garden. Catherine stood between the brothers, holding both their hands. I love you both. Her voice drifted across the years. I cannot choose. I will not choose. We will all three be together for eternity. She wanted to turn us both, Damon said. Make us vampires like her. She said we would be companions forever, the three of us, never aging, never dying. But we couldn't share her, Stefan said. Neither of us could bear the thought of the other having what we wanted, so we demanded she choose. Young Stefan's face was anguished. Please, Catherine, it has to be one or the other. Choose me. Young Damon's expression was harder, more commanding. Choose me. I'm stronger than him, better suited to the darkness you live in. Catherine's beautiful face crumpled. Why must you make me choose? Why can't you see that love doesn't have to be singular? I have enough love for both of you. That's not how it works, young Stefan said. Then perhaps... Catherine pulled away from both of them, tears streaming down her face. Perhaps the only way to end this conflict is to remove myself from it entirely. What do you mean? Young Damon stepped toward her. But Catherine was backing away, her face set with terrible determination. I thought I could make you happy, both of you. But all I've done is tear you apart. Brothers should not hate each other over a woman. We don't hate each other, young Stefan started to say. But it was a lie, and everyone knew it. I do, young Damon said flatly. I hate him for trying to take you from me. Catherine sobbed. Then I've failed. I've made everything worse. Perhaps if I'm gone, you can repair what I've broken. She turned and fled into the house, the brothers calling after her. But when they followed, they found only her maid Gudrun, who told them her mistress was not to be disturbed. The scene shifted to dawn. Eleanor watched as the brothers burst into Catherine's chambers to find her gone. The window stood open, and in the growing light they saw something that made both of them cry out in horror. On the garden stones below lay a pile of ash and a white dress. Beside them, Catherine's lapis lazuli ring glinted in the rising sun. She walked into the sunlight without her ring, Stefan said, his voice hollow with old grief. She burned. She left a note saying she hoped her death would unite us, that we would forgive each other if she was gone. But it didn't unite us, Damon said. It destroyed us. Young Stefan was on his knees beside the ashes, weeping. Young Damon stood rigid, his face a mask of rage and anguish. You did this, young Damon said, his voice like ice. You forced her to choose and she chose death. This is your fault. My fault? Young Stefan surged to his feet. You're the one who couldn't accept that she loved us both. You're the one who demanded she choose. Because you were weak, you would have shared her, diluted what we could have had. And now we have nothing. She's dead because of your pride. The argument escalated, both brothers, shouting, and then young Damon's hand went to his sword. Perhaps it's better this way. Perhaps one of us should have died instead of her. If that's what you want, young Stefan said, his own hand finding his weapon, then let's finish this. Giuseppe appeared, running from the house, shouting for them to stop. But the brothers were beyond hearing, beyond reason. They drew their swords and faced each other across Catherine's ashes. The duel was brutal and swift. Both brothers had been trained in swordplay. Both were strong and skilled. Steel rang against steel in the dawn light, and Giuseppe's shouts became screams as he realized what was happening. Young Damon struck first, his blade finding the gap in Stefan's guard and sliding deep into his younger brother's chest. Stefan gasped, his eyes going wide with shock and pain, and then his own sword, already in motion, completed its arc and pierced Damon's heart. They fell together onto the stones, their blood mingling with Catherine's ashes. "We died beside her," Stefan said softly. "Both of us run through, both bleeding out. Giuseppe held us and wept and cursed us for throwing away our lives over a woman. But we didn't die," Damon said. "Not completely. Catherine had given us her blood over the preceding weeks, fed us small amounts each time we met. She was preparing us for the transformation, hoping we would choose to turn. We had just enough of her blood in our veins to complete the change," Stefan said. "When we woke that night in the family crypt, we were no longer human. We were vampires." The scene shifted to darkness, to two figures stirring on stone slabs in the family tomb. Young Stefan sat up, confused, thirsty with a hunger he didn't understand. Beside him, young Damon was doing the same. "What happened?" young Stefan whispered. "I remember dying. I felt your blade, as I felt yours." Young Damon touched his chest where the wound had been. The skin was unmarked, healed completely. "We should be dead." Understanding came slowly, and with it, horror. They were dead, but not dead. Changed, transformed into the very thing Catherine had been. "This is your fault," young Damon said, his voice cold. "If you hadn't forced her hand, if you'd been willing to share, we would all still be alive. Catherine would be alive." "Don't put this on me," young Stefan shot back. "You're the one who drew your sword first. You started this." "And I'll finish it," young Damon said. He stood and moved toward the tomb entrance. "I never want to see you again, brother. From this moment, you're dead to me." "The feeling is mutual," young Stefan said, though Elena could hear the break in his voice. Damon fled into the night, and Stefan followed more slowly, both of them leaving behind everything they'd known. Their family, their home, their humanity, all of it abandoned in the wake of Catherine's death and their own transformation. "We went separate ways," Stefan said, as the memories faded and they returned to the lakeside. Damon embraced what he'd become. He killed without remorse, fed on humans, used the darkness inside him as a weapon. And I tried to hold on to my humanity. I fed on animals, avoided killing, spent decades hating myself for what I was. "We didn't see each other for over a century," Damon added. "And when we did cross paths, we fought. Every time. The hatred between us had festered, grown into something poisonous." "Until you came to Mystic Falls," Elena said softly. "Until you," Stefan agreed. "You looked like Catherine, but you weren't her. You were stronger, braver, more genuine. And somehow, loving you began to heal what had been broken between us." Damon nodded. "It took us another century and a half, but we finally learned what Catherine tried to teach us from the start. Love doesn't have to be possessive. It doesn't have to tear people apart. It can heal. It can unite. Eleanor looked at both of them, these brothers who had loved and hated and finally found peace. I'm not sorry she chose both of you. I understand why she did. We know, Stefan said gently, and we're not sorry you loved us both. It's what finally made us remember we were brothers before we were rivals. We wasted so much time, Damon said, but he was smiling now. But we have eternity to make up for it. Eleanor took both their hands and felt the rightness of it. Not one brother or the other, but both. The way Catherine had wanted. The way it was always meant to be. The three of them walked back toward the lake house where Elena's family waited, and for the first time in over 160 years, the Salvatore brothers walked in step. Their long war finally ended, not by victory or defeat, but by understanding, not by choosing, but by accepting that love was large enough to hold them all. The Gilbert Lake house existed in eternal summer, warm sunlight filtering through trees that never shed their leaves, water lapping gently at a shore that never changed. Elena walked through rooms filled with everyone she'd lost, everyone she'd loved, and felt a peace so profound it was almost overwhelming. Her mother was in the kitchen, humming as she always had, and the scent of chocolate chip cookies filled the air. Her father sat on the porch with a medical journal, reading glasses perched on his nose. Margaret played in the yard, forever 4 years old and laughing. Jenna and Alaric sat together on the dock, his arm around her shoulders, talking quietly about nothing and everything. John Gilbert stood at the water's edge, at peace in a way he'd never been in life, all his guilt and mistakes forgiven. And Jeremy appeared suddenly, tackling Elena in a hug that lifted her off her feet. "Took you long enough," he said, grinning. "We've been waiting." Jeremy, Elena held him tight, this brother who'd struggled so much in life, who'd found peace only after death. "I missed you. I missed you so much." "I know, but you lived, Elena. You really lived. I watch sometimes, and I was so proud of you." "Dr. Gilbert," he pulled back, his eyes bright. "You became exactly who you were meant to be." Bonnie joined them, slipping her arm through Elena's. "He's right. You honored your parents' memory. You saved lives. You made your time matter." "But I lost so much," Elena whispered. 63 years just gone." "Not gone," Bonnie said gently. "You were sleeping, but we were all waiting. And when you woke up, you still had years left. Good years. Important years." Stefan and Damon approached, and Elena felt her heart expand to hold the impossible truth that both of them were here, both whole, both at peace with each other and with her. "Walk with us?" Stefan asked, offering his hand. Elena took it, and Damon took her other hand, and the three of them moved away from the house toward a path that wound through woods she'd never seen before. Trees arched overhead, their branches forming a cathedral of green and gold, and beneath their feet the path was soft with moss. "I need to understand something," Elena said, after they walked in comfortable silence for a while. "How does this work? This place? We're all together, but some of you died decades before others. Time doesn't make sense here." "Time isn't linear here," Stefan explained. "Everyone who's passed exists in the same moment. Your parents have been here since 2009, but to them, it feels like you just arrived. Damon died 2 weeks before you, but for him, it's as if no time passed at all. It's the now of forever, Damon added. Past and future don't exist. There's only this moment, eternal and unchanging. Elena tried to wrap her mind around it and found she couldn't quite grasp it. But somehow, it didn't matter. What mattered was that everyone was here. Everyone was whole, and the pain of loss had transformed into the joy of reunion. I have a question, she said, about Catherine. Both brothers tensed slightly, old wounds still, tender even in paradise. Is she here? Elena asked. Is Catherine in this place too? Stefan and Damon exchanged a look. We don't know, Stefan admitted. We haven't seen her. This place, it seems to be shaped by the connections we made in life, the love we carried. Catherine's love was complicated, twisted by manipulation and selfishness. She may be somewhere else, Damon said. Or perhaps she's still searching for peace, still working through what she did. Death doesn't automatically grant redemption. Sometimes souls need time to heal before they can find rest. Elena nodded, understanding. Catherine had caused so much pain, so much destruction. Perhaps forgiveness, even here, was not automatic. They walked further, and the path opened into a clearing Elena recognized. The old cemetery in Mystic Falls, but transformed. The gravestones were still there, but they were covered in flowers, beautiful and vibrant. The darkness that had always clung to that place was gone, replaced by light. This is where it started for us, Elena said, remembering that first day of school when she'd found Stefan among the graves. I was visiting my parents' graves, and you were there. I was writing in my journal, Stefan said, trying to make sense of being back in Mystic Falls after so long away. And then you appeared, and everything changed. I thought you looked like Catherine, Elena remembered. That's why you were there, wasn't it? You'd seen me earlier and followed. Yes, I'm not proud of that, but I needed to understand how it was possible, how you could look exactly like her. Stefan squeezed her hand. I never expected to fall in love with you. I thought I was chasing a ghost, but I found something real instead. We both did, Damon said. You weren't Catherine's shadow, Elena. You were your own person, fierce and determined and impossible to ignore. You taught us that love doesn't have to destroy, it can heal. Eleanor stopped walking and turned to face both of them. I need to know something. Really know it. Do you regret any of it? The pain, the fighting, the years of hatred between you. Do you wish I'd never come to Mystic Falls? Never, Stefan said immediately. Everything I suffered was worth it to have known you, to have loved you. Same, Damon said. You gave me something I'd lost centuries ago. Hope. The belief that I could be more than just a monster. Would I have chosen an easier path if I could? Sure, but I wouldn't trade what we had for anything. Good, Elena said, because I wouldn't either. My life was strange and tragic and nothing like I planned. But it was mine. I chose it, all of it, and I'm not sorry. They walked back to the lake house as the eternal sun began its descent toward an eternal horizon. The sky painted itself in shades of amber and rose, and the lake reflected the colors like molten gold. Eleanor's family had gathered on the porch and the lawn, all of them waiting. Her mother came forward and took Eleanor's hands. Are you at peace now, sweetheart? Miranda asked. Have you found what you were looking for? Eleanor looked around at everyone assembled there. Her parents, who had died to save her. Jenna, who had stepped up to raise her. John, who had tried to protect her in his flawed way. Jeremy, who who had struggled but ultimately found his path. Bonnie, who had lived a full, beautiful life so Elena could have hers. Alaric, who had been teacher and friend and father figure. And Stefan and Damon, the brothers who had loved her enough to heal centuries of hatred. "Yes," she said, "I have." "Then welcome home," her father said, and gathered her into his arms. "We're so proud of you, Elena. Everything you became, everything you did. We watched, and we were so proud." Elena let herself be held, let herself be surrounded by love, and for the first time since Wickery Bridge, she felt completely safe. No danger lurked in shadows. No ancient vampires hunted her blood. No curses hung over her head. She was simply Elena Gilbert, finally home. The evening deepened into twilight, and someone started a fire in the fire pit by the lake. Everyone gathered around it, sharing stories and laughter. Eleanor learned about the lives of those who died before her, heard Jeremy talk about his years of sobriety and the family he'd built, heard Bonnie describe her travels and the magic she'd mastered. "I went to every continent," Bonnie said, her eyes bright with memory. "Studied with covens in Scotland and South Africa, learned ancient spells in China and India. I fell in love 3 times and had my heart broken twice, and it was all wonderful and terrible and exactly what living should be." "I'm so glad," Elena said. "I'm so glad you didn't waste a single moment." "I didn't. I couldn't. Not when you were sleeping, missing your life so I could have mine. I lived for both of us, Elena. And I lived when I woke up," Eleanor said. "I became a doctor. I helped people. I made my time matter." "You always did," Stefan said. "From the moment I met you, you made everything matter more." As the fire burned low and the stars emerged overhead, brighter than Eleanor had ever seen them in life, she felt the rightness of this place settle into her bones. This was where her story ended, but it was also where something new began. "What happens now?" she asked. "Do we just stay here forever? Does nothing change?" "Everything changes," her mother said, "and nothing does. Time passes differently here. We exist in the moment, but the moment is infinite. You can explore, learn, grow. This isn't static, it's eternal." "There are others beyond this place," Damon added. "Other souls, other realms. We're not trapped here. We've simply chosen to stay together because this is where we belong." "Will Caroline come here eventually?" Elena asked. "When her time ends?" "If she chooses to," Stefan said. "We'll be here waiting, however long it takes." Elena nodded, satisfied. She looked around the circle of firelight at the faces of everyone she loved, and she felt something she'd been chasing her entire life without knowing what it was. Completeness, wholeness, peace. She'd spent 17 years as a normal girl in Mystic Falls. She'd spent months navigating the supernatural world, falling in love with a vampire, becoming entangled in ancient curses. She'd slept for 63 years and woken to a world transformed. She'd lived another decade and a half, becoming a doctor, helping people, honoring her father's memory. And now she was here, in a place beyond time, with everyone she'd ever loved. "I'm ready," she said softly. "Ready to rest, ready to just be." "Then rest," her father said. "You've earned it." Eleanor stood and moved to the edge of the lake, Stefan and Damon beside her. The water reflected the stars, infinite points of light stretching into forever. "Thank you," she said to both of them, "for loving me, for fighting for me, for waiting." "Always," Stefan said. "Forever," Damon added. And standing there between them, Eleanor Gilbert, finally understood the truth. Her story had never been about choosing between light and darkness, between one brother or the other, between human and vampire. It had been about choosing to live fully, no matter the cost. About choosing love even when it brought pain. About choosing to fight even when fighting seemed impossible. She had been the girl who survived drowning, the girl who loved a vampire, the doppelganger who refused to accept destiny, the doctor who healed instead of hurt. She had been all of these things and more. Complex and contradictory, strong and vulnerable, brave and frightened. She had been human in the truest sense, flawed and beautiful and utterly herself. And now, finally, she was at peace. Elena turned away from the lake and walked back to the fire, to her family, to the people who had shaped her and loved her and waited for her. She settled between her parents, Stefan on one side and Damon on the other, and let the warmth of the fire and the warmth of love surround her completely. This was home. This was rest. This was the reward for a life lived fully despite impossible circumstances. Elena Gilbert's journey was complete. From Wickery Bridge to eternity, from tragedy to transformation to peace. And here, surrounded by love in a place beyond time, she finally closed her eyes and simply was. The story was over. The struggle was finished. The search was ended. Eleanor Gilbert had found what she'd been seeking all along. She was home. And so, Eleanor Gilbert's story comes to rest. Like leaves settling on still water after a long autumn wind. From the girl who survived drowning at Wickery Bridge, to the young woman who loved a vampire and chose the darkness willingly, to the doppelganger who refused to let ancient curses write her ending, to the doctor who spent her final years healing instead of hurting. Elena's journey was never simple, never easy, but always, always hers. She was born human, transformed by love and loss into something more. And in the end, she reclaimed her humanity, not through magic, but through choice, through the decision to live fully, no matter how strange the path became. The Salvatore brothers found peace through her. Two souls who had hated each other for over a century, finally remembering they were family. Finally understanding that love large enough to hold them both was not weakness, but strength. And Bonnie, sweet brave Bonnie, who lived a full and beautiful life so her best friend could wake and live her own. She carried Elena through decades of sleep and never once considered it a burden. Because that is what love does. It waits, it endures, it gives without counting cost. In that place beyond time, where eternal summer warms the Gilbert Lake house, and everyone Elena ever loved waits in perfect peace. Her story continues, but quietly now, gently. No more battles to fight, no more darkness to face, just rest and love, and the infinite patience of forever. So close your eyes now, sleepy hearts, and let Elena's story carry you down into dreams, where the lost are found, where love heals all wounds, where every ending is also a beginning, and where peace waits for all of us, patient and eternal, on the other side of our own Wickery bridges. Sleep well, and know that in the darkness, love remains always. Good night.